And welcome back to the Hot Lap. We are talking the court case. In one side you have McLaren and Zach Brown. On the other you have the IndyCar sensation, Alex Palou. He's basically the Max Verstappen of IndyCar. And you'll probably see why when we look at his stats. But before we get into that, I just want to make it pure and simple. What is this all about? So, in 2022, Palou, he signed a contract with McLaren to drive for their IndyCar team, basically, starting in the future. Now, McLaren claims that Palou later reneged, backed out, cancelled the contract on that agreement, and decided to stay with his previous team, which is called Chip Ganassi Racing, an IndyCar team in America. Now, as a result, McLaren is now suing Palou. They're suing Palou in the UK Commercial High Court, claiming 20 million in damages. Some reports say it's up to 30 million. This is dollars. That's absolutely extortionate. How's that guy going to pay that? I don't think he gets that a year at IndyCar. So, at its core, McLaren says Palou broke a valid contract and cost them money. Palou says, no, I did not. I don't have to pay because of how McLaren handled it all. So what's the main argument from Palou? Well, he says he was misled. Palou claims McLaren made promises, or, if you want to be court speak, gave false impressions, false representations that he could move into Formula One with them. This was a key reason he signed the contract. He signed the contract because he wanted to get to Formula One with McLaren. Okay, now he contends that McLaren later brought in a certain Australian that we know very well that's currently leading the championship. Yes, Oscar Piastri for their F1 program. It conflicted with what he had been told and changed his viewpoint. He must have been thinking, wait a minute, you signed Oscar. I thought that seat was for me. He admits he breached the contract, i.e. he did not fulfill the contract, but disputes how much he owes in damages. Now, he also accuses McLaren of, and this is quite serious, destroying or deleting evidence, such as we're talking WhatsApp messages to hide how communications about this whole deal was evolved. But as we know, there's two sides to every story, so what's McLaren's side? Well, McLaren argues that Palou breached the contract and they should be compensated for the losses that McLaren suffered. For example, they spent money preparing him, expecting sponsor revenue, their cost of finding a replacement for him, etc. They deny, and this is significant, they deny that they ever guaranteed Palou an F1 seat. They said it was only a possibility, not a firm promise. Now, McLaren rejects the notion that they destroyed evidence, asserting the use of disappearing messaging is part of the company policy or standard practice. So McLaren rejects the notion that they destroyed evidence, asserting that use of disappearing messaging is part of their company policy or standard practice. That's a bit weird, if I'm honest. Surely they want to keep records, but hey, I'm not McLaren, I don't work at McLaren, I don't know. Now, in testimony, McLaren's Zach Brown has denied misleading Palou and said that there was never a binding commitment to Formula One for Palou, though he acknowledged the possibility. Now, key developments, because the trial is now ongoing. The trial is happening in London's High Court in the UK Commercial Court. Basically, Palou recently testified, stating that the contract was based on lies and false impressions. Now, in cross-examination, Brown was challenged on these messages that Palou said, were a part of the deal, their evidence. But Brown, in which he supposedly instructed others to delete WhatsApp communications just before Palou backed out. Brown, though, denied any wrongdoing, and that's interesting. So Palou said there's no messages, they've been deleted. Brown has denied any wrongdoing. Now, part of the dispute now hinges on how much McLaren can reasonably claim damages and whether those claims are speculative. For example, guesses. They're going to have to guess roughly on what they may have lost. It's really, and that is really, really difficult. One curveball, though, recently, and we'll get into it, is Palou has drawn Fernando Alonso's name. Imagine that during the proceedings, to argue matters of competitiveness and expectations in F1. We'll get into that. So, where things stand currently? The case is ongoing. Closing arguments and submissions, they're expected to conclude in November next month. The court's decision are going to determine whether Palou must pay damages, and if they determine he has to, how much. The outcome will depend heavily on whether the court believes McLaren's portrayal. For example, there was no firm F1 promise, or Palou's, for example. He was very much misled. And there we go. Well, that's the basics out of the way. Let's get into it, shall we? So, here is Alex Palou. The High Court on Friday, his contract with McLaren was based on lies about an F1 seat. They said, I thought I had the right to terminate an agreement that was based on lies and false impressions. That's what he had. And at that moment, I either fight with CGR, the team who have given me the opportunity to be the IndyCar champion. CGR means Chip Ganassi Racing. They had all the team around me, or I go in breach with a person who has been, misleading me, and where I have not been seeing or having these opportunities. It's quite interesting, isn't it? So it really is Palou versus Mr. Brown. So who is Palou? Well, here we go. He is he's got an amazing amount of stats. Races started 236, races ended 238. 30 wins, 80 podiums, 28 pole positions, fastest laps 32. He is the IndyCar champion this year. He absolutely dominated. He dominated the series in 2025. He is the Max Verstappen of IndyCar currently. He is a very good driver. He's very sought out. He could, and we have seen IndyCar drivers before, hello Jacques Villeneuve, be very good at Formula 1, although we never know. So in hearings from McLaren racing lawsuit, Zak Brown says he never strung along Alex Palou, and that is McLaren's, basically that's their stand. And as we know, a lot's happened since then. So we won't hold it against you if you've forgotten, but as we say, they're saying back in 23, there was obviously this dispute. Reporting from the hearing on Monday, this was last Monday, so just about a week ago, Reuters said that Palou's counsel questioned Brown, suggesting he had a habit of making false promises of F1 glory. McLaren, unlike Red Bull, have only got 2 seats before shafting them. So he makes false promises, so Zak Brown, it's been alleged, by Palou's side, and then shafts him. Brown reportedly responded by saying, I never strung along Alex. I never told him he would be under consideration for 2023. There was some optionality, is that even a word, to join F1, but there was some option to join F1. If you remember, in 2023, they signed a certain Australian driver. Now, the whole saga began when McLaren announced it signed Palou for the Arrow McLaren for the 2023 season, but at the time, his current team, Chip Ganassi Racing, said he was still under contract for them for 2023. He ultimately remained at the Chip Ganassi team, but served as McLaren's F1 reserve driver at the same time, with the supposed expectation that he'd make an official move away from Chip Ganassi at the end of the season. Of course, he never did that, and went on to win 3 consecutive IndyCar titles from 2023 to 25 with Chip Ganassi. DeMarco, and that's basically Palou's side, his lawyer, or barrister, if you will, said in court that Palou signed a contract with the intention of getting to Formula 1. According to Reuters, this news site. But of course, Palou, as we know, he's not in Formula 1. He never got the seat. So, current F1 driver Oscar Piastri has that seat. Brown reportedly responded by saying that Palou could be a real talent. I'm sure he could be in Formula 1. And that he was plan B if either F1 drivers were injured, or plan C should Piastri have failed to perform as a rookie, which now we know he's leading the championship in 2025 is not the case. So Brown also said that Ollie Behrman and Nick de Vries are examples of drivers who landed full-time seats in F1 after spending time as reserve drivers. Yes, they are. Now, Reuters reports things became testy during one exchange. DeMarco reportedly accused Brown of speaking absolute rubbish, made up on the spot, to which Brown interjected that DeMarco was the one speaking rubbish. Palou is expected to make his turn on the witness stand on Thursday. This has already happened. And let's have a look at that. So, in summary, Palou claims that McLaren or Zak Brown, but McLaren in general, used Formula 1 as a negotiating tactic. And the 4 times IndyCar champion, he, as we know, as a lot of people do, he's dreamed of F1. He says Brown assured him of possibilities, and Palou also discussed a potential AlphaTauri drive. Brown told him Piastri signing was not his decision. That's interesting. So, the Spaniard who won this year's Indy 500 said in a witness statement how he felt Formula 1 was used by current champions McLaren as a negotiating tactic to get him to sign for their less competitive IndyCar team. McLaren Racing are seeking, I still don't get this, 20 million from the 28-year-old. As we've already said, Palou has admitted that breach of contract, but argues he owes nothing. He said, my motivation in signing the March 2022 McLaren truck contract was that I had just won my first IndyCar championship, and I thought it was a good time in my young career to get to F1 and try and have a chance there, he said. After I won the IndyCar championship, I thought it would be tough, but feasible to get a chance in F1. Okay, a fair assumption. Palou said everything changed with McLaren when Australian Oscar Piastri, the current F1 championship leader, announced on Twitter he was replacing Danny Ricciardo for the 23 season. Well, yeah, basically that's what happened. A bit more than that. But despite that, Palou signed another contract with McLaren after being assured, and this is the key to the case, assured by McLaren boss Zak Brown that Formula 1 did remain a possibility. He said, Zak told me in various conversations we had in person, including during the time I was testing with McLaren at the track in September and October, that's in 2022, that he loves IndyCar and wanted to get a driver from IndyCar to F1, he said. Zak told me he believed we could make it happen and that he would give me all the preparation I needed to be an F1 driver for McLaren. The issue is, verbal contracts, I guess, aren't really worth the paper they're printed on. So Zak told me Oscar's performance would be evaluated against mine for the 24 seat. The Spaniard said he talked to Red Bull's Motorsport Mr. Marco in June about a possible drive for AlphaTauri as his McLaren dream seemingly started to fade. The Austrian asked how much it would cost to get a release from McLaren, but on talking with Brown, lost interest. Brown, attending the hearing after being questioned on Tuesday and Wednesday, smiled and occasionally shook his head during the session, accused by obviously the council of being the one stringing the team along and signing in the IndyCar contract he had no intention of fulfilling. Palou replied, absolutely not, I think you're twisting the story. And that was McLaren's counsel, Paul Golding, trying to say, you signed this contract, you had no intention of going to McLaren. He said that while Chip Ganassi Racing would be paying his legal cost, his salary was reduced accordingly and not among the top 3 in IndyCar. So that's interesting. The hearing's going to resume on October the 12th, closing submissions on November the 5th. Bonfire night for some. So where does Fernando Alonso, I promised you Fernando Alonso at some point. Where does Fernando Alonso fit in the Palou case? Well, he found, as Abe mentioned, that Alex Palou defended his decision to renege on a deal to join McLaren's IndyCar Formula 1 IndyCar team with an eye on Formula 1. In 22, as we know, it goes on about this deal, etc. And that played out behind closed doors. It was announced that the Spaniard would continue, yada, 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 broke his contract. We know that. And as we know, he was expected to join McLaren's IndyCar team in 2024, making the switch potentially, according to McLaren, maybe, to Formula 1 in the years to come. Palou, though, pulled out of the McLaren deal, sparking a court case. Yeah, I know. Zak Brown told the media at the time that Palou had informed us he had no intention of honouring his contract with us in IndyCar or Formula 1. Interesting. With the matter landing the two parties in court. The court case is underway in London, and while giving testimony, as in giving his evidence, Palou unexpectedly spoke of Fernando Alonso, the Formula 1's double world champion. The Spaniard's defence, because Palou's from Spain as well, is based on the claim that he was deceived, as his solicitor Nick DeMarco put it. He was deceived by McLaren's Zak Brown, giving testimony at court, giving his evidence in the witness stand, so to speak. He said, at the time, I thought he was genuine, as in Zak Brown promising him, or talking about offering an F1 drive. He said, I now consider that Zak made me think that there was an opportunity to have the full-time F1 seat as a negotiating tactic to get me to sign for McLaren's IndyCar team. And that's interesting. And racing for McLaren's IndyCar team was never the dream of who was the then 2021 IndyCar champion. After all, he noted that even double world champion Alonso was one of the best drivers ever, couldn't win with McLaren's IndyCar team. That's interesting. And why? Well, to be fair, Alonso, side quest, quickly, Honda wouldn't give Alonso an engine because of GP2 engine gate at Japan. If you remember, the Honda engine wasn't the best in the McLaren. And going down the start-finish straight, Alonso very public went on the radio, GP2 engine, as someone passed him. It's Alonso doing Alonso things. But anyway, after he noted that even double F1 world champion Fernando Alonso, one of the best drivers ever, couldn't win in McLaren's IndyCar team. That was an absolute shambles, though, that Indy 500 attempt by Alonso. But there we go. He entered in 2017 with Honda Andretti, but retired late in the race with an engine failure. This was before, obviously, GP2 engine gate. He tried again in 2019 with McLaren Racing, But, and this is what I'm talking about, Honda I don't think gave him an engine, didn't make the grid, and went on to make a third attempt in 2020 with Aero McLaren, where he finished 21st. So, if, said Palou, a driver does not have the machinery and the best team around, then the driver cannot win races. There are many examples of big names in motorsport who were not able to perform because of the machinery they were given. Look at Max Verstappen in the middle of this year, Lewis Hamilton with the 2022 Mercedes onwards. Even the best driver needs arguably one of the 2 or 3 best cars, and they need to be very close. Fernando Alonso, he said, is a 2-time champion and probably one of the best drivers, and he couldn't win. In 2019, Fernando failed to qualify for the Indy with McLaren. However, he failed to qualify against a driver who was a rookie and had no previous experience. He said in 2017, and this is quite significant, so stay with us. He said Fernando qualified for the Indy 500 with another team and almost won until the car broke. He was doing really well. In 2020, Fernando finished 21st for the Indy 500 with McLaren. At some point it said 21, but there we go. But Alonso couldn't succeed in what was a one-off shock result that Palou concerned that an entire season would be more brutal. He added, maybe a driver can in one race do something a little more aggressive, but I do not consider that a driver can, during the course of a full year, or 4 or 5 years, have too much impact. This has been seen with many other drivers, such as Fernando, he said. Palou, he went on to win, obviously, the 23, 24, 25 titles, as we know, and he wrapped them up. Piastri is up against his teammate, Lando Norris. The trial is ongoing. We didn't need to hear that. Planet F1, but basically what he's saying is, I joined purely to get that Formula 1 drive. I understand that the McLaren IndyCar team is not the best team. I probably couldn't win the IndyCar with them, but I signed with them with a promise to get to Formula 1. And you're absolutely right. It's going to be very much up to the courts to see who is telling the truth. If you made sense of that and you're not subscribed, give us a subscribe. Comment below. Let us know who you think is in the right, who's in the wrong. I appreciate it. It's going to be absolutely subjective. But until then, we'll speak to you soon. Thank you very much. See you next time. But above all else, stay safe.